From the North Beach Podcast Company in partnership with TSN, welcome to episode 5 of season 2 of the Ray and Darren's Hockey Podcast. We've got Toronto Maple Leafs President Brendan Shanahan coming up here on the pod. And man, we've been waiting for this week for a long, long time, haven't we, Ray? I mean, wow, hold on a sec. You've actually been doing hockey games a lot with the World Junior Championship. I've been waiting for this week for a long, long time. It's still kind of hard to believe that we're already here.
Well, it seems to me like the exhibition season is going to start. Yeah. You know, like we've heard some spits and spats of news, but of course we're jumping full on into the pool here. I do find it interesting, Drags, like as much as we're anticipating and excited for this, there is trepidation that the unknown is sitting out there. Like, right. What's the season going to play out like? How's it going to be? Like as of today, which as we're taping here, the NBA is postponing a game. Mm-hmm. One of the teams doesn't have the 8 mandatory players to play. And I guess we just have to say this is the way it is. Just hope that everybody's healthy as this goes on. But it would be foolish to be surprised or shocked that there's going to be issues here. There's big potholes in the road that everybody's going to just have to try and drive around.
Right. Well, you bring it up, so we might as well dive right into headlines on that topic. And I mean, we're going to continue to talk about COVID-19 until there is no COVID-19, and God willing, that's sooner than later. But it's not going to be this 2021 season. You and I were talking about this the other day, and of course, the realist in all of us recognizes that there have been NHL players who have tested positive for COVID-19. It's gone through their households, all of that. And that's not going to go away anytime soon. But where it becomes a huge issue, teams, I know you're talking to coaches, general managers, they're terrified because, okay, if it's one player, depending on who that player is, maybe you're okay, but you have to be okay with that player not being available to you for what? The better part of 3 weeks? And that could be a real problem depending on who it is or how many players are impacted.
Well, the likelihood of it being one player and never anybody else is pretty small. Right. And so, you got to think of the way that teams are as much as they go through the protocols. What my understanding is, Drades, is the teams aren't necessarily worried about the travel or about when they're on the road, because the players are really not going to have much leeway at all. You're going to get on a private plane. You're going to fly to the hotel or to the city, get on the bus. Everybody's masked. You're going to get yourself to the hotel. You're going to check in the hotel. You can't leave till it's time to go to practice in the rink. And then you're going to come back and forth. No restaurants, no bars, no mingling with the general population. It's at home that they're more worried about, where there is freedom for players to go to the grocery store, to go, do whatever with their families. And the ask for these players is that you don't do that even at home. For the simple fact is, somebody tests positive, the chance of it ravaging the team becomes greater as time goes on. What if, like in the NFL, a specific position group get sick? Like, what if you have both goalies sick? Now, I know they're not in the same meetings like NFL teams are, but I'll tell you what I would do. I would have a goalie at one end of the room and a goalie at the other end of the room. I would have my D. I'm not even kidding. I would have my D spread all around the room. I don't want all 5 of them sitting together. Like that, I could never understand that with the NFL. Like, so Denver got all their quarterbacks wiped out 1 week. They had to play with a running back.
I know.
Another team, Cleveland, lost all their receivers because they're all in individual meetings. Best I can spread out as much as I can, and have to hope that COVID doesn't catch your team, because Dregs, I'm convinced teams will be impacted greatly by their COVID health.
Right.
Not to say players are going to get really sick, but if they get sick, if they test positive, they're out for 3 weeks. That overlaps with another guy's couple of 3 weeks. You might miss the playoffs because you just never field your team.
No, And that's a legit point. And, you know, when I mentioned earlier, coaches and general managers are terrified, really that's what they're afraid of. You can make it work with a taxi squad, 4 to 6 players, you know, if you're down 4 to 6 players, but what if it amplifies to 10 plus, right? You
Yeah,
know,
here's the way to look at this, Drakes. I test positive for COVID. So now they take me out of the room. 3 days later, your symptoms show up.
yeah.
So now your 3 weeks is going to, and we're saying 3 weeks because it's 2 weeks quarantine and a week we're guessing to get back your legs
Yeah.
and fitness. So now your 3 day or your quarantine period overlaps 3 more days from mine.
Yeah.
And then somebody else tests, you know, like it's a, man, it's a incredibly difficult and challenging thing.
It really truly is. And then to skip from COVID to injury potential, you know, 56 games is a tight schedule. I'm going through that North Division, and, you know, so Winnipeg opens on Thursday, and then Winnipeg plays 5 games in 7 nights. And the majority of the 7 Canadian teams play, I think, 4 games in 6 nights, depending on
Right.
how it breaks down initially. No preseason games, a shortened training camp. This smells a lot like muscle pulls, groin strains, like
I
all
don't
of
know
that.
how it can't, Drakes.
Yeah.
I just think of this, like guys come in and they're in really good shape. They've had time to, you know, predict when the start was going to be.
Yeah.
Nobody's been hit. I'm telling you, the difference between being in good shape and then when somebody is slowing you down or not letting you go where you want to go, the difference is miles. That takes time. That's all strain on your muscles as you're trying to elude and evade. And then somebody's hooking you and you're, you know, there's a groin, there's a low back, there's something. And it doesn't even have to be anything major. But as you laid out the schedule, somebody pulls a groin in Winnipeg's second game, they're going to miss 5 games.
Yeah.
You know, just
Right.
the season's only 17 weeks long.
Yeah.
You know, like that stuff is going to be so much an unknown, and is going to so much determine, I think, what is probably going to play itself out.
Yeah. So as we're recording this, you know, we've just had the luxury of consuming an incredibly long list of players placed on waivers. Like, I mean, I didn't count how many players.
89 today.
Is that what it was? 89.
Yeah.
And predictable, yes, because again, to clarify, to be placed on a taxi squad, you first have to clear waivers. And I look at Corey Perry, because I believe that Corey Perry would have known that the Montreal Canadiens were very likely going to try and squeeze him through to their taxi squad. That would have been discussed before he accepts his 1-year, $750,000 deal with the Habs. Maybe the same for Mike Frolik. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't take a player like that. You know, unless you're so up against the 81.5 salary cap, you can't squeeze another nickel in there when you've got good players on that list.
Well, here's the way you squeeze it in is the player that they would replace. If you pick up Corey Perry or Michael Frolik, the player they would replace would be a younger player on a good team that makes 750 grand. You'd bump that young player to the taxi squad, or he would go to the American League, which hopefully is going to get up and running early February. And so it's a dollar in, dollar out transaction. It's not a $750,000 ad.
Right.
Man, right. If I were a good team and that was a scenario I could see working for me, man, wouldn't it be nice if you could drop those guys in once in a while?
Yeah.
Like maybe they don't play all the time. They probably don't play all the time. Yeah. But someone's going to get banged up. We just went through this litany of stuff that could happen.
Yeah.
And if that player's sitting there for you, I wonder what the discussions were with both players there and players like that.
Yeah.
That you sign in one place and it's at least a possibility that you would play somewhere else.
Right. So Mike Hoffman, the St. Louis Blues announced officially announced that he's agreed to the 1-year contract with the St. Louis Blues. So enough of the pretend PTO nonsense.
Yeah.
Let's flip over to the Vancouver Canucks, because Travis Hamonic essentially, stole the game plan from Mike Hoffman and did the same thing with the Vancouver Canucks. Do you like that Vancouver blue line? Looks pretty good, doesn't it? I mean, I know they lost Tanev, but they were gifted Nate Schmidt by the Vegas Golden Knights, essentially.
Right.
And now they add a good, and maybe calling Travis Hamonic a depth piece is a little disrespectful to his game. He's capable of helping that Vancouver blue line.
Their blue line got one hell of a lot better by adding a veteran in Hamonic, who I think is, I hate to say he's on the decline, but he's not, but I guess I am, because he's not what he used to be. But
Right.
Injury has stolen a lot from him. He plays a really hard type of minute. And so his age, probably you can multiply it forward a little bit.
Yeah.
However, Vancouver had Myers, Hughes, Schmidt, Edler, and then Jamie Benn and 3 untested, totally untested players. Like, how is that going to work? It's not.
Tough.
And so they get Hamonic in there, and now you've got Hamonic to play with Hughes, right? That's, Nate Schmidt's a good player. He's really good. Gifted is a great word, that they were gifted. So now you've got Schmidt playing with Edler, and now, in some form. And then you've got Myers with probably Ulevi, their first round pick from a few years ago, who seems to have come around the corner injury wise and play wise. Well, now you look at the blue line and you go, well, I could see that. This was a good signing for them. Now, I don't know, Dregs, you would know this, like, they can't make it official till they put Michael Furland on LTI, correct?
Correct. And that's, the league has stepped in on that too, by the way, right? I think Frank Saravalli was doing some reporting on that on social media and whatnot, where they're saying, okay, you need to disclose this and you need to file that contract. Otherwise, the roster that you have today is the one that you're going to work with, because it is a form of cap circumvention, right? And I believe that's why the St. Louis Blues did what they did in announcing Hoffman. So again, as we're recording this, maybe it will be announced when people are listening that Furlan has been placed on LTIR. But that's the wiggle room for Jim Benning and the Canucks to make the 1-year deal with Travis Hamonic work. Yeah,
it looks like Ericsson's going to be either on the taxi squad, or I guess that's where he'll be. So $1 million comes off the cap, 1.075. That's a pebble in the shoe of Canuck fans out here. That's for sure. Is that, and they're just, they've seen enough of what didn't work, but they've still got, they've still got some clogs in the salary cap there. But this whole division is gonna be a bit of a scramble, and I think we all know it's going to be really interesting. But Vancouver's okay. I don't think they're Calgary. I don't think they're Toronto. I don't think they're Montreal. But I think they're in that group with Edmonton and Winnipeg. Yeah. And kind of, it's in my opinion, it's going to be a 3-team scuffle to see who gets in. You mentioned, we had a brief conversation about Corey Perry, and Frolik fits into that category too. But I don't know, I call it the collection of graybeards, right? And it seems like, veteran players with Stanley Cup experience, just experience period, have always mattered. So, let's not twist this in a different way. But I look at what the Toronto Maple Leafs have done here, and man, I'm intrigued by it. I am. And I think this goes back to the Jake Muzzin trade with the LA Kings, where they went, okay, we're acquiring this piece. And then they realized, okay, Muzzin's a pretty good defenseman, but man, he's good in the room, and he's good in the bench, and he's good with the media. And, they had Spezza there again, the experience factor. They bring in Jumbo Joe Thornton, and they bring in Wayne Simmons. So now it's become more than coincidence
or just trying to
Right.
mix things up a little bit, right? So is that good management, recognizing that, you know, you're really inexperienced here still, so let's bring in more of these proven performers and kind of old goats to try and lead the herd?
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, I think any of it, like, adding Bogosian and Simmons, trying to address a
Yeah,
toughness sort of thing. It's all looking at what are our weaknesses and our strengths.
yeah,
The older guys, I'm not so sure on, only in that I remember being an older guy, and like your legs are there and then they're gone. It happens pretty quick.
right.
It doesn't happen to a 27-year-old. It happens to a 40-year-old.
Hmm.
The Jason Spetz is 37. Going to be when's he going to be? Going to be 38 at the end of the year. Thornton, of course, is plus 40.
Yeah.
Simmons has unfortunately had a lot of injuries to him, that we don't really know how the pace of the game is going to look this year, because it didn't look great last year.
Hmm.
So the list of 40-year-old effective players is really short. Like it's almost non-existent.
Yeah.
And so they're asking Joe to fill that spot, with Matthews and Marner. They're asking him to play on the power play. Can he do it? I have no idea.
Yeah.
And I guess they probably don't know either. But for that cost, they probably feel, hey, look, we're getting a grade A1 person, which is what they have in Spezza too, and what they're going to get with Simmons.
Yeah.
And so we're going to put these A1 people in the room and then probably hope that their on ice performance helps.
Right.
Because if you think of it, those three who are not going to win any skating races, that's 25% of your forwards every night.
Hmm.
Like it matters.
Yeah.
It matters. So that's the unknown part to this. As far
Yeah.
as the people and the professional look to the game, they've upgraded for sure.
Mhm. Yeah.
100%.
Well, you go from one extreme to the other, and I know you're a big fan of this young man, but Ottawa is electric with Tim Stützle and everything that he represents. I was talking to Bruce Garriock, a longtime beat reporter in Edmonton, this morning, in fact, and he's kind of he's taken us back into a time where he's trying to reflect on where another player like that was coming in with so much influence and hype. Was it Alexandra Daig way back in the day? Jason Spezza for sure. But, is Tim Stützle as close to can't miss, in terms of the crop of drafted
Dregs,
kids?
I'm gonna be shocked if he's not a star. I don't mean a good player.
A star.
There is something about this kid. You just see it sometimes, and you'd like to qualify it with 10 different things,
Yeah.
because you can see his obvious skill, but there's something else there. And I think there's Patrick Kane style in Tim Stützle. When it's 15 years ago, it's hard to believe, but when Patrick Kane came out of the draft,
Yeah.
remember that was, I guess it was the 05. And so Taves was a year older, but he came out of college. So both Taves and Kane were at camp in Chicago at the same time.
Right.
And so Cammie and I went to watch, and we were in Chicago. And so he said, "Oh, let's go watch." So it was obvious Taves was ready to play. I mean, he was strong and, just obvious. And I said, "Wow, Kane is really good, but he's not ready to play." I mean, you can just see he's so little. And Cammie's like, "You're wrong. That guy's ready to play." And of course, she's never let me forget.
No, I'm sure.
However old Patrick is at this moment, she gives it to me. And so I see that with Stützle. And what I see is, so he's on a German team that had no players. They were all sick. and he
Yeah.
was still scoring. And then when they came back, he was still one of the three best forwards in the tournament. I would
Right.
argue he was the best forward in the tournament because he didn't have the people around him that Trevor Zegras or
Right.
Dylan Cousins had. I, I am really excited for Ottawa to have this young man to talk about and all of these other young people coming in instead of everything else that's
Yeah.
been kind of lingering around that Senators franchise for a while. It's really cool to see. Dregs, I don't think there's anything DJ Smith can hand this kid that he won't be able to handle. Doesn't mean he's going to get 50 goals, but I don't think there's anything he can't handle.
Well, and I also like how Derek Stepan is, just trying to shepherd this kid into the National Hockey League, having fun with him, talking about how he feels like he's his adopted son and things of that nature. So,
Right. Well, I'll tell you now, here's a funny thing. So when Patrick Steffen came to Atlanta,
yeah,
was 1999. And my oldest son was 11, Matt.
yeah,
And Patrick was 18. And I was 35. We had him to the house for dinner. Patrick had more in common with Matt than he did with me. So Steppen must
for sure.
giggle when he's got, he's got his own kids who are not that much younger than him, than Tim Stützle.
No.
So it's a weird, as you get older, it's like, wow, that's a weird thing.
All right, we'll wrap up headlines talking about the Pierre-Luc Dubois scenario.
Ooh.
And I feel like we're going to talk about this on the podcast a lot here in season 2, obviously until he gets dealt. And there are some who believe it's going to be sooner rather than later just to avoid the distraction. But you're talking about a guy, early 20s, 6'3", 220-pound centerman who, he's at least a number 2. And on a lot of teams in the National Hockey League, he's damn near a number 1 center. And who knows, what the upside of Dubois is going to be here. I think conservatively, we can say 3 of the Canadian teams would have interest. And I'm talking about Montreal, Winnipeg, Calgary. And there's probably every Canadian team would inquire. I don't know how Edmonton can make it work, but anyway.
why wouldn't Ottawa inquire?
For sure. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, of course.
And you've got a plethora. There's that word again, right? Yes.
I like it. 2 weeks in a row.
2.
Yeah.
I can't use it a third week in a row. Otherwise,
I bet you do.
Bragging. But Ottawa's got that great collection of young players too that have been
for sure.
in Belleville. And Pierre Dorion, he's gotten crafty during his time in Ottawa. So that might be something they can pull off. And then you look at the American-based teams. We know the New York Rangers are going to be in there. The Los Angeles Kings, the Anaheim Ducks would love to acquire Pierre-Luc Dubois.
Yeah.
I'm looking at Chicago, the uncertainty of Jonathan Toews, what's going on there. Maybe Stan Bowman can lob something at Jarmo Kekalainen that makes some sense. Anyway, give us your assessment of Pierre-Luc Dubois. And if you were a general manager for any of the teams that I've just mentioned, how hard would you be in on this guy?
I would be on the phone right away. The guy has untapped offensive potential.
Yeah.
And I say it's untapped because he's not gotten to that maturity of being able to do more to his game.
Right.
Columbus plays a direct straight line style. I think that fits really good with a big, really good skating, powerful centerman.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I think of a number 1 center, I think of the slickness of, like of a McDavid or a Draisaitl or a Matthews that's a number 1 center to me. So I would lean to him being a 2, but only for that reason. He can be your franchise centerpiece. Isn't it funny? Just a few years ago, people were shocked that Jarmo Kekalainen walked past a Finnish player in Jesse Puljujärvi to take Dubois. And we've seen in short order that Kekalainen was pretty bang on. So when all these rumors are coming around, Drakes, if I'm calling, I know that I'm not giving Yarmo a first, a B prospect, and a couple of extra pairs of shoes. Like,
Right.
this is a costly deal. He's got 2 years just signed on his contract. Plus, when he's out of that contract, he's still in your team's control.
Right.
He's not at unrestricted free agency yet. So this is a costly deal for whatever team is acquiring.
But if it's Winnipeg, it's Lion A going back the other way. However they configure that. If it's Montreal, is it Kotkaniemi coming back with, you know, maybe one of your better prospects like Gouli or something like that, right?
But I mean, that's a big cost.
It's a
right?
lot.
If it's Calgary, you're starting with Sean Monahan. Like, that's not even a discussion. Like, the guy that you're getting back isn't 4 years from being a good player. Dubois is already a top end NHL player. I'm getting that back.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to give me that back, I can't make the deal.
Mm-hmm.
And therein really lies the danger for, or not danger, the trouble for Dubois is you can ask for the trade, and then his agent will say, oh, they're asking too much. And Kekalainen's going to say, I'm not getting offered enough.
Yeah.
And the answer is probably he's not getting offered enough.
Right.
Because you've got to rip the heart of your team out, of your forwards. That's the heart of their forwards.
Right.
And you have to replace it.
Do you, as a general manager, need to have permission to speak with the agent, Pat Brisson, to make sure that this isn't a season and a half and he's gone, or he's not going to stay, right? Because that's the reality.
The problem is, but the problem with that, so I can ask, and Pat Brisson and Dubois can say, yeah, I'm going to stay, but they can't even sign him to an extension.
No.
Not until summer, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So you would have to be working in the desk drawer there to get an extension done that's going to come in effect. Would it be July 1st? I don't know. Whatever that day is going to be, right? When it's eligible. But that would be the way, that would be the only way I could strip my roster of assets to make this deal.
Yeah, and some managers won't do that. Won't give permission. I understand that. So
and I get it too. Yeah, I get it too. You're like, wait a minute. What if I give you permission? You can't get a deal done. Now I've got a player that's now 3/4 of the way out the door because he's already in his head thought, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Now he's not.
Yeah.
So you're left with a guy that's dragging baggage around. That's not going to work.
Did you see the picture? So you and I, because we do an enormous amount of prep work on the Ray and Dregs podcast, right? So we have a conference call on Sunday evening. We push away from our families because we're committed. You know, we're
trying to put the show together. Yeah.
It matters to us. We take it very seriously. And one of the main topics of conversation was Cammie's fantastic pork chops. And then I was talking to you about the ribs, and I've sent a picture. You've seen my ribs. They were Holly's mom's, God rest her soul, Hazel Hildebrandt's famous honey garlic ribs, off the charts. So how were the pork chops?
The pork chops were unbelievable. A little maple syrup, a little, it's really good. What I don't get though, I thought in COVID times, you're not allowed to have people over for dinner.
Correct.
How many people were eating those ribs at your place? Seriously, man.
I know. Well, you
guys not eaten for a week?
I know. Well, okay, and you've rattled Holly Dreger. You have, because you also made a comment, geez, Dregs, you guys eat a lot of meat, eh? And
well, you do, because you've got the smoker, which we keep hearing about. Yeah. Now, so I'm hoping you'll put this plate of ribs out on Twitter.
Yeah.
Or on Instagram.
We'll put it on Ray and Dregs. We'll throw it out.
Yeah. Because your wife and daughter cannot have the appetite to eat that. I mean, it's got to be mostly you and Mason.
Right. Well, Yes. But we do.
But I mean, how much ribs can they eat?
No, that's a fair point. We do package some of it out. So we'll send it to,
Okay. Now, did you have a side dish or was it a side of meat?
I don't even want to tell you what the side dish was. Well, there was actually two.
Macaroni and cheese.
No, that would be healthier than what the side dish was. The main side dish was a vat of French fries.
Oh, but you know what? I bet it was good. Do you take the French fries? Because I would, and soak up the sauce that's left off the ribs?
100%. Yes.
Oh, that sounds
good.
Good.
It was so good. And, just because, again, Holly Dreger felt guilty, there was a big platter of fresh veggies. So,
which you just pushed down to the end of the table and just ate the fry.
No, I had several carrots and a couple of sticks of celery, but then you defeat the purpose of the fresh veggies because I put like 2 tablespoons of dip on the end of the celery stick.
Right.
So
you know how I know at our house the pork chops are good? You know the bone, the long bone?
Yeah.
Riley and I end up eating it right like there's no forks left, right? So
yeah.
It was good. But we couldn't, the weight of that platter had to be something.
Yeah. There was a lot of ribs there, let's just say. But I also had them for lunch, so.
And how did you sleep after?
I had the meat sweats going in.
Oh, yeah.
I did sleep really, really good. It's funny you say that. Now it comes to mind. But and I'm not bragging. This is, I guess I kind of, as soon as you start a sentence by saying you're not bragging, right?
You are.
You're actually bragging, right? Yeah. So what are we? We're recording this. It is January 11th.
Yes.
11 straight days on the stationary bike or intermittently the rowing machine. Yeah.
Okay, so here's the key with that though.
Okay.
You can't just tread water. So you can't ride the bike, eat 4 pounds of ribs, have 2 beers, and think you're making any progress.
2?
6.
No, you're very, very right. Wow. But again, now you didn't explain this to me the last time we brought this up, which was an episode or 2 ago, where you were this was nice, Ray. You were saying, hey, don't go crazy on the bike or in the rowing machine. Like just take it easy,
ease in,
slow.
Ease in.
And I've done that. I'm around 30 minutes, so it's not that bad.
Nice.
But now we got to bring Cammie back into the mix here because the diet stuff is the second part of the equation that I've got some work to do.
Well, she can help you out with that. The problem is the plans always look good. My biggest thing is I told her to hide when I came back, just put it away, like all the Christmas stuff that's still around. Because if I get into it,
you're gonna eat it.
It's no good.
Wow.
No good.
Do you have is there a go-to chocolate?
Any chocolate.
Yeah, what are those ones? Ferrero Rocher. I mean, it's
I like those. But Dregs, honestly, any chocolate.
Yeah.
I salted dark chocolate with almonds. Oh, love that. Can eat it by the bucket. I watched the second half of the Steelers-Browns football game yesterday.
Yeah.
And it was taking everything in my willpower not to get up and walk back to where I think the chocolates are. The only thing that was keeping my amusement was one of our producers, Sam, has been a lifelong Browns fan. And when the game started to get close, I started texting him, "Oh, don't worry, Sam, it'll be fine."
Yeah.
And he was not happy.
No.
He sent me a GIF of this karate master standing there in a pose and another guy just booting him in the junk. He goes, "That's what it feels like right now."
I've seen that GIF. That's ridiculous. Hey, we won't because it'll sidetrack episode 5, and we may have to invest a bit more time in it because we're not just a hockey podcast, right? We talk about all sorts of things here, as we've just exemplified. I watched the first portion of the Tiger Woods documentary.
Oh, last night. Good.
Oh, I mean, yeah, it's good. It's good. It's good. Maybe not as deep as I was expecting it to get.
Yeah.
I learned something though. Um, I mean, I think we all had a pretty decent impression of what Earl Woods was all about.
Mhm.
There's more dark in Earl Woods, like
Okay.
just how he lived his life and all of those things. So I don't want to spoil it for you because I know that
Mhm.
you
Yeah,
enjoy
we'll be getting to it.
Tiger's mom. She's a hardcore lady.
Really?
Yeah, I did not expect that. I did not expect
No, I did not know that.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm looking forward to the next one. So I'm not going to be the spoiler, but you're going to watch it. We'll watch. How many was there? 2 episodes, or is there more?
Too, yeah. So
Yeah.
I'll be on that. When I was, eh, I have trouble watching a series if it's like 5 years. I'm like, man, I'm not going to watch 50 episodes. I'm going to lose track halfway through, and I don't.
Yeah.
So I got told to watch the movie The Gentleman. Have you seen it?
I don't think so.
Did you like the Guy Ritchie movies, Snatch and Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels?
Yeah. Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Oh, I love those. Anyway, this is a lot like it. Hugh
Okay.
Grant is in it,
Yeah.
and Colin Farrell is amazing. So I've watched that, and I was looking for something to watch, and I totally forgot that the Woods doc was starting yesterday. So I'll get on that this week.
Yeah. You check it out. It's and we'll, whether it's episode 6 or whenever we get around to it, we'll give our assessment of what we
Sure.
think. Interesting stuff.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah, I'm into it.
Yeah. Our interview with Brendan Shanahan is presented by our friends at coolbet.co. NFL playoffs underway. The NHL season started this week, and coolbet.co is where it's all happening with all the best free to play sports and casino games. As you know, you've got to be 19 to play, and Coolbet reminds you stay cool, always bet responsibly. Brendan Shanahan now joining us on the Ray and Darren Hockey Podcast. And Shanny, I mean, regular season about to kick off. 6 months, no hockey. That's a long time for the players. It's a long time for the staff, but I mean, it has to be a long time for you as well. So you must be looking forward to getting things going again.
Oh, for sure. And I think we're all, not just us, but society, but, in hockey, we're discombobulated. And I know, for a lifetime since I was a little kid, when I talk about years or seasons, they don't necessarily start from January and end on December 31st. The way you remember years are in hockey seasons, which usually start at around September and go till whenever the season ends. And you get your summer, you get your off season, and like I said, that's something that gets ingrained in us when we're tykes and peewees. So it's been weird every once in a while to be in a training camp environment and pop your head up and look at a calendar and see that it's January, or that you're playing hockey in August. But we're all adapting, and I guess that's what the whole world is doing right now, trying to adapt and figure things out and try to get through this time.
When when the first lockout occurred, Shanny, we were playing, and we all talked about how compacted the schedule was and how tough it was going to be, and then it just kind of became what we did. Like that just became the season. Right now, it seems like Wednesday should be an exhibition game, yet it's a real game. And so, how do you guys get ready with that sprint, and then you have to kick it off like it's happening now?
Well, we ask our players to constantly be in a state of an ability to read and react and adapt. Everybody has a game plan. It's like they say in boxing, like everyone has a plan till they get punched in the face. And it's the same in hockey. You have a plan, but you have opponents and they're talented and they've got good coaching and good scouting. So you're always having to learn to read and react. And I think going into the season, aside from Well, first off, some of the feedback that I think the league got from players after the bubble situation was that they didn't need as many exhibition games as they thought to get prepared for competitive, intense hockey. So that was sort of an interesting perspective. You know, you talk to a guy like Jason Spezza, who is a veteran, and you know, like he probably wanted 4 or 5 exhibition games, and got like 1 and said it was fine. Or the perspective from all the players was they didn't need as much time to prepare. So you listen to them and you go off of that. There's so much more in tune with their bodies and they condition year round. So, it's not like they come to training camp in the first couple days, like it was for us in the 80s and 90s, where we're all walking home with sore hips and sore groins. Like, they've been skating hard and been skating like that and stopping and starting for months in preparation. So the players are prepared for that. And the one thing that they also don't know, and we can talk about this sprint and we can talk about how many games in a new division and different travel and different restrictions and no fans, but we don't know what's coming next week. We don't know, as we see in some of these cities, and as we see in other sports, we're trying to prepare our players to be ready to adapt in a way that they don't know what's coming next. Just get ready, prepare for today, get ready for your next game, and you're almost just getting ready to what happens. What happens if somebody tests positive? What happens if somebody tests positive and there's a few close contacts? What happens if it's the team we're supposed to play that night and our game gets canceled and we've got to push that back? So I think a big key for all NHL teams this year will be ability to sort of react to a different situation and adjust.
Well, one of the big changes, of course, is, and we're all excited in Canada, is the division. And it seems to me, just watching, like, it makes the year even more important. It's like it opens up this door that isn't always there. Like, do you guys feel that? Or do you try not to think about the bigger issue of the teams and who's good, who's not?
I think you do it every year, but I agree with you. I'm excited to see what it's like. I'm excited to see other Canadian teams more often. But I would say we go into every year thinking, here's the reason why we've got to be excited about this year, and here's the reason why we are excited. But I just think that there has always been something special about playing in Canada. There's always been something special about visiting Canadian cities, no matter where you play or whether you're a player or in management. There's a unique energy. There's a knowledge amongst the fans. So I think, not looking ahead to next year and do things go back to the way they were or whatever. I think we're all just sort of really curious and really excited to do this. It's unfortunate we're not going to be playing in front of fans. A lot of the things I loved about traveling to these Canadian cities was playing in front of the passionate fans and going out to dinner. You got a favorite restaurant in Calgary and Edmonton and Vancouver. So we won't be doing that stuff. But nevertheless, I do think there's just something about waking up on a game day when you're in a Canadian city where it just feels like a game day, and you get a sense that the whole city feels it as well.
Well, Toronto's definitely feeling the buzz, Shanny. There's no question about that. And we dissect everything in this city. That's what we do. So when Sheldon decides to put Joe Thornton on a line with Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner to start, I mean, that gets our attention and it creates more of that buzz. Ray and I were talking earlier in the podcast about the influence of the graybeards of the Toronto Maple Leafs, maybe even around the league a little bit, and why it matters. So you've got Jumbo, Wayne Simmons, Bogosian. You mentioned Jason Spezza. How involved were you in that process of, and maybe it dates back to acquiring Jake Muzzin, where you recognize, look, we're still a young team. Our nucleus is young. So bringing in these experienced guys now, like Joe Thornton, could and probably will make a pretty big difference.
Well, I mean, you could describe young in a bunch of different ways, and some people would just use young as an excuse or a bit of a crutch. And to me, that's not what this is about. Anytime you can bring, like, first and foremost, you've got to be able to play, because it doesn't matter who you are, what your name is. Like, if you don't feel like you're contributing to the team and you're important to the team, you get quieter. You get quieter in the dressing room. You get quieter on the ice. So we all recognize that you have to have an important role, and you have to feel good about your game to have a presence and to have an impact on the Marners and the Matthews and the young players in our organization that are still maybe not even in our lineup, maybe not even making the Leafs, but get to see what these guys do in the gym every day and get to see what these guys do in practice every day. So it's incredibly important. What I would say to everyone is, we believe in balance. And I think that, you're constantly seeking that out. Just the nature of the way that you build things and that you build NHL teams, you don't always have the balance that you're seeking, like, instantly. And so I think that, constantly trying to move, and you're constantly trying to improve. You're constantly trying to, make your team better. Other teams are trying to be better than you. They're trying to knock you down, and that's the nature of the competition. But I think that, everything we did in this off season was meant to add more balance and make ourselves a team that not only we've had some regular season success, and we haven't had the kind of playoff success that we now think that we're capable of. And I think that it's just trying to get over that hump and get to that next level. And, the players that we've drafted and we've developed are great players, and they want it. They love being Maple Leafs. I've seen not only one difference I've really seen here is that a lot of Ontario guys wanting to come home, wanting to play for the Leafs, wanting to be a part of that. So that's exciting, but ultimately everything gets decided upon on the ice.
So you've got these older guys, as Drake's mentioned, and have great resumes to their games. Can you make any comparison to what they used to call the old goats and the kid in Detroit, to you and Hully and Luc Robitaille? Like, can you make any contributions to or comparisons to you guys to what these guys might be able to do?
Well, I used to get mad because I used to say to Nick Lidstrom, like, how come I get lumped in with Hully and Stevie? Like, they're like 4 years older than me. Nick, I was born in 69. I think Nick was born in 70. I said, how are you part of this youth movement? But
that's good.
And actually, it was great because each summer when Kenny Holland would, sign Dominic Hasek or trade for Chris Chelios, and we would kid around like he's just the more older players he goes against, the younger that we're perceived to be. We'd sign a guy that was like 32, and Kenny would call it a youth movement. I think it's you definitely learn from history, but you also have to be very careful with history, because I think that there are comparisons and things that you can learn and look back on from teams in the 50s and 60s that still apply today. But you also have to be very careful to not get so hung up on things that have occurred in the past that they paralyze you from sort of learning new tricks or knowing new trends. So again, I keep going back to that word balance. You've got to figure out like what is useful information that is transferred from decade to decade, and what is information that is sort of like old information and not good. And, it's funny. I think I was fortunate enough when I joined the Red Wings in '97 to win my first Stanley Cup. But I really look back and think, that team ended up winning 3 Stanley Cups, that organization at that time, and that core group of guys. And they were all very different. They were all unique in and of themselves. And I think maybe if we had just won that one in '97, we might have that sort of frozen in our heads as like, well, you win one cup, you take a you take a picture of that team in your mind and you think like that is the only recipe in which how you win a Stanley Cup. What was interesting about, that team going back to the next year was, unfortunately, we lost Vladimir Konstantinov in the limousine accident. And then Mike Vernon, who won the Conn Smythe Trophy, was traded that offseason. So we were lucky enough to win back-to-back. They were both really hard. They weren't easy, but they were different. And then in 2002, that was different as well. So when people get hung up, every time a Stanley Cup is given out, we sort of look at that team and how they've been assembled. Are they a puck moving speed team? Okay, well, let's copy that. And the next year, a big physical team wins, and you say, let's copy that. I think what's important to learn is that there are lots of different ways that you can win this thing. And the other thing is, and I was just listening to somebody talking about this, a former Stanley Cup winner talking about how hard it was and the different moments in which even when you win a Stanley Cup, you were facing elimination, or how like, a hit of a post or a goal disallowed or an offside might have been the difference between, winning a championship and not. You look back even at the Raptors here in Toronto, and I believe it was the third round of the playoffs. They started in Milwaukee and lost their first two games, and then they won their third game in triple overtime. The players don't forget how hard it is and how close it is, and those little tiny moments where something changed and shifted and allowed them to be champions. But we tend to look back in history and just sort of think that it was a smooth ride each time these teams won a championship, but it's a hard thing to do.
So one of the things that I think of as you're talking there is, so nobody's won a Stanley Cup with the way that you guys have built your roster, right? Like, because not a lot of teams have had the access to an Austin Matthews and a Mitch Marner and a William Nylander and a John Tavares. But does that make the additions of players like Mikheyev, and this year it's Barabanov and Lehtinen, does it make those types of acquisitions even more critical to build the depth from players that you didn't really have access to from your drafts or from a year ago?
Well, the first thing I'd say is generally speaking, whether we're talking about hockey or we're talking about sports in general, I want to hear everyone's perspective, because even if you disagree with someone's perspective, there's a chance you may learn from them. It's important to have diverse opinions in a room that present different ideas, and you can then choose what idea you want to go with and what approach. But generally, when a sentence starts off with "no one has ever won like this," I've just heard it too many times over the last few decades in lots of sports. And no one's ever won with Russians. No one's ever won with a European captain. No one's ever won, and until someone does. No one's ever won when they're in last place on January, and then someone does. So I think that when a sentence starts off that way, I listen, and you consider it yourself. But those things get erased if you're successful. Yeah. When it comes to the players that we have to develop and that we have to draft, it's absolutely crucial and vital to our organization. We, over the years, the cap has grown and grown and grown. And generally speaking, if you look at other teams and players that get signed, what in one season might appear to be an expensive or restraining contract for a team, within a year or two is suddenly very favorable. It was growing. But now we're in a situation where it's not growing for a while. So having a really good development staff, having a really good scouting staff, it's what every team in the league is really zeroing in on, especially at this time. You hope to have a good organization that can attract players, certainly through free agency. But I think while it's always been important, it's never been more important for all teams in the NHL to really develop their players and really draft well.
Toronto, Shanny, as you know, has an insatiable appetite when it comes to hockey, and in this case, the brand and the Toronto Maple Leafs in general. Is there a misconception out there that, all right, Kyle Dubas is general manager, Sheldon Keefe is head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs, they want skilled players. But Brendan Shanahan, man, he came up through the old school of hard knocks, won your Stanley Cups with different teams as you described in Detroit, but that you advocate for toughness. Is that a bit of a misconception?
Well, I would say it's probably a misconception that Kyle and Sheldon don't also advocate for toughness and intangibles. And I remember the first time I met Kyle and I was seeing what he was building in Sault Ste. Marie. Obviously then what he and Sheldon did for the Toronto Marlies. All of their teams, if you look at the players that played on those teams in the Sioux, if you look at those teams that played for the Marlies, they had a real nice balance of really skilled players, which you need, and also toughness, physicality, intangibles. And I think it's important to say, like, sometimes toughness is about showing up for a battle, sticking together as a team. But I'd also say that I can think of lots of players in hockey that maybe have never had a fight in their careers that are incredibly tough and resilient and gritty and by the way, champions with multiple rings. So I think sometimes there's an argument that's sort of going on in hockey, maybe it's going on in all sports, this sort of like analytics versus old school. I was curious about it when I first got hired. I tried to figure it out. I didn't really understand what the fight was about. I've got even less time for that argument now. To me, it's information. And I think some people will take a manager that is considered to have tough teams. They'll say, oh, he doesn't care about skill. That's not true. Then you'll take a manager that has a background in analytics and you'll say, oh, he doesn't care about toughness. He only wants skill. That's not true either. I think if you want to know how we think as an organization, I think we want to have a balance. And if you look at some of the moves that Kyle has done over the last 2 years, once we established that core of talented young players, bringing in a guy like Muzzin, bringing in a guy like Clifford, signing veterans. We've always had a guy like Roman Polak, Bogosian now, like big tough guys that can sort of be big leaders in the dressing room. There's always been a value to it, but until you win, it's not going to really be recognized. So we're all trying to do the same thing in the NHL. We're all trying to win, but I think that's important to state that I said in an interview recently, like I've lost my appetite. Not that I ever had an appetite for players getting carried off in stretchers, but I don't really enjoy watching guys. I think my time, especially at the league, and as I got a little bit older, my time in the league and learning about headshots and illegal checks to the head, like that's not something we thought about in the 80s and 90s. But there's been an awakening there, and I think that a disdain for sort of those illegal plays is just something that everyone in management recognizes now, more so than we did in the past. But as far as physical play and good hard hits and good clean hits and winning battles, that's vital to any team to have success, and that's something that regardless of Kyle's interest in analytics, like I said, to me, analytics is just information. And if there's good information and there's bad information, but what's most important is what do you do with that information? And when I first met him, one of the things I was really impressed with was he sort of had a good idea what bad information was and what valuable information was. And as he's grown under Lou Lamoriello and the success that he had with the Marlies and Sheldon, what he's done as a coach coming up through the system, I just thought that they really had a good concept of how to balance the two.
You mentioned Sheldon right at the end here, and so this is first full go for him, and it's pretty clear he's putting his stamp on how he wants things to go, and he's not taking over a team that was in mid-stride or midstream or whatever. You played for arguably the greatest coach of all time. I just came from the World Junior Tournament, and Igor Larionov told me that it was like sitting in the front row of a classroom with a professor, but it was never always easy.
No.
So Can you think of one Scotty story? Because there's 8 million that you can tell about how you had to figure each other out, because it was not always the smooth path, right?
Oh no, it was never a smooth path. But you know what? Behind it all, I'll say this about Scotty, and it wasn't pleasant every day. And that's the other thing people think when you're a winning team, you're winning these championships, or you're a contender. It's just pleasant every day. No, it's still tough every day. You still have controversies and things like that. But at the end, like behind it all, no matter how we felt about him on that particular day, you might be happy with your coach, you might be mad at your coach. You know, inevitably he made good decisions, and so there was a trust built up there. And sometimes we almost like grudgingly look back and at a line change he had made, where we'd sort of go like, what is he doing? And then we'd score and we'd be like, oh man, he did it again. He's smart. But we all wanted to have a relationship with him, but he wouldn't let that happen. And he kept us, he liked for us to be off balance. He liked for us, I think, to have to deal with adversity. On the flip side, if there was no adversity in a game, if we were winning 6-0 against a last place team in the third period, Scotty would not be quiet behind the bench. He was on us. Like, it's like we're winning 6-7, 8-0, and Scotty just won't shut up now. He's talking about a shutout. You're not supposed to say shutout, Scotty. Stop yelling shutout. Stop saying I want a shutout. Stop complaining about drop passes, complaining about this. But if it was 1-1 in the second overtime period of a game against Colorado, he was quiet. He was silent. He was thinking. He was making decisions. So he knew in a moment where the game is stressful and there's anxiety and there's adversity, he knew to then just sort of run the bench. And when the game was too loose, that's when he created that atmosphere. So that when we got into the playoffs, so that when we got into an adverse situation where we were behind the 8 ball, that we were used to adversity. It's almost like if you were training soldiers, like on a training field, and you're firing guns in the sky and creating all these noises. He was trying all season long to recreate those anxieties that you feel in the playoffs, so that by the time we got to the playoffs, we were more of a playoff hardened team, just by doing the right habits and having certain standards in practice during the regular season. So that's why the regular season is so important. First, it's hard to make the playoffs. Second, it's the time in which you create standards, so that I never remembered in Detroit under Scotty Bowman getting to a game 7 where we said, we have to play the game of our lives. Like, we have to step it up. We have to pick it up. I always sort of felt like, you know, when on lesser teams, there was this feeling like we have to have the game of our lives tomorrow. We have to really pick it up. But on Scotty Bowman teams and on those teams, and I'm sure for some of the elite teams in different sports, there's a feeling of we have to just play our game. Like, we don't have to elevate anything. We've been elevating all year. And look, it's regular seasons, whether it's a 50-game season or 82, you're going to go through highs and lows. You're going to have losing streaks. You're going to have a week or two where, you know, guys like you, Ray, between the benches are going to say, this team's never going to win a thing playing this way. There's probably a week or two last year where somebody would have said that about Tampa. There was a week or two the year before where somebody would have fairly said that about St. Louis. So you're going to have these bad times, but how do you use the season to develop those habits so that when you get in the playoffs, you know how to play a certain way consistently?
Shanny, last one for me. There's been a lot of talk about the advertising, the helmet stickers and all that stuff. In the pandemic, I got hooked into F1 racing. Don't know anything about cars, don't know a damn thing. My kids tell me you got to get in it. I love it. One of the things that they do really well is their drivers, and there's only 20 of them in the world, most of them interact really well. Like, there's this guy, Daniel Ricciardo. I'm a huge fan. He's a bit crazy. He's a bit funny. Do you think we'll ever find a time where NHL guys become more and more comfortable And is it maybe the players that have grown up with social media and Instagram? And because I think there's a real miss for the NHL with their guys. The guys have great stories and they're funny. And yet we get an interview and they talk about pucks in deep and off the glass and all that crap that we always did. Like, is there a time for that to come? You were good at it. Like, is there a time for today's player to open up?
Yes. And I think you touched on it with, and I'm just going off having teenage children myself, like the idea of social media and expression, expressing yourself and is great. So I do think this next generation of players are more open about sharing things with the world through their social media channels. But I'll also say this, like, there's still a part of me that's also a traditionalist, that I also really do love the qualities of hockey and hockey players. Like, we have, I think we've just got great people. And I think I like a lot of those attributes that other athletes in other sports, yeah, sure, they might say, well, hockey players don't say the most outrageous things, but they admire a lot of other qualities about hockey players, about teamwork and toughness, and about playing through pain, and I want to say that, like, there's a difference between playing through an injury and playing through pain. I think it is a great team sport, and I think that you have to understand that you can sign a whole bunch of like individuals, but until you become a team, you're not going to win in hockey. So yes, do I think that they're going to become and continue to be more interesting and show their personalities? But I also still am a little, I still love those qualities about hockey players that sort of put their teammates first. Look, we're a sport in which when you score a goal, the first thing you do is you look for your teammates to hug. There's a lot of other sports, when you score a goal, you run away from your teammates and try to get off on your own. I love that. That's one example of a hockey player that I love. They want to go down the bench. They want to see each other when something good happens.
Terrific stuff, Brendan. We know it's an incredibly busy time of year, not just in Toronto, but around the National Hockey League. So we really appreciate you taking the time to join us here on the podcast.
Great. Thanks, Dregs. Thanks, Ray.
All right. Thanks again to the president of the Toronto Maple Leafs, Brendan Shanahan. Throat punch, not a big challenge this week. I feel like as the hockey gets going, then obviously more game-specific throat punch candidates, Ray, are going to emerge. But were you at all surprised, because I was, at how much reaction there has been to the National Hockey League selling ads, particularly the helmet ads? I don't understand why people care. I don't care if there's an ad on the helmet or not.
That is my throat punch to people that are complaining about this, because in anything you do, there's advertising. Right. So why can't the NHL advertise on their most notable product, which is the players? So, people always send, oh yeah, it's going to end up like this, where the European teams have ads all over their sweaters and pants and socks. I told you, and I've spoken about this, I went to the game in Berlin last year when Landon was playing there.
Right.
Nobody looked like they weren't having a good time. That was the best game atmosphere I'd been at in a long time. Remember back in the day, because I was playing, I hate saying that, Jesus, back in the day, damn. Anyway, there were no ads on the boards. And when they put the first few ads on, we were like, that's ridiculous. Those things will never last. Now you're like, you don't even notice them unless you see it and it's advertising. Yeah. What about the 4 places on the ice where the ads are? Yeah. You know what I can't believe they haven't done? Why isn't there ads in the face-off circles? That to me makes sense, because everybody's stopped. You're not skating across the ad, right? Where you might only catch a glimpse. Everyone's stopped. You see it. Yeah. The ads on the helmets, man, it doesn't matter at all. If they I saw somebody go, oh, why don't they just put it on the front of the helmet for maximum exposure? Guess what? That's where it should go.
Good idea.
Because let me guess. If you're advertising, do you want more people or less people to see your ad? Jeez, man, more people. You go on the internet. I bought a pair of socks. All of a sudden, a couple package of socks or whatever.
Yeah.
Every time I go on the internet, man, I got more sock ads coming at me from. It's advertising.
Yeah.
Why can't the league maximize their revenue? I don't get it.
So you know where you needed those socks?
Oh, probably lots of places.
Last Tuesday before the gold medal game, when you got locked out of your room naked. Imagine the things you could have done with the socks.
Would have been helpful. Would have been helpful. I'm guessing, yeah, the socks would have been inside right with my boxers.
By the way, I mean, I know how many times I was asked on radio across North America about Ray getting stuck naked in the hallway of the Edmonton Hotel. I mean, seriously, how many times did you retell that story aside from the podcast?
Well, so we came back and there was the podcast, and then I'm on radio stations in Vancouver, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Toronto, and Ottawa every week. So there's 5 more. I was on Twitter, like every time something happens, some smart ass is firing a comment out there. Yeah, this one, lack of judgment and very poor execution is how I've got my head around this now.
Yeah, if Cammie wasn't tired of the story of you get stuck naked in the hallway, probably after hearing you on radio retell the story 72 times is enough. She doesn't need to hear it anymore.
No, she's had enough. She has had enough.
That's a tough one to beat, man. I mean, we're all about the stories here on the podcast, but that one's a tough one to top.
Drake's, I got to tell, maybe I forgot a bit here, but I can't believe how many people text me or direct messaged me with their story.
Oh, come on.
Oh yeah. People in the media.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, theirs isn't in the morning.
Yeah.
It's later at night.
Yeah.
When they've had a few wobblies, and all of a sudden, one guy said he was sure he was going to the bathroom, and when the door clicked, he woke up, or cleared up, and he's standing out in the hallway. Yeah. That's a bad break too.
Yeah. So as soon as you told the story, O-Dog texted me and he goes, "Dude, you got to get me on the podcast." He said, I've got one similar. I'm like, we just recorded it or whatever last week. And then he goes, "Yeah, you know what? On second thought, my wife probably doesn't need to hear that story." So I have no idea what happened, but I don't think she listens to the Ray and Darren podcast. So hopefully
we'll get him on. We got to get him on again.
We will. All right. Speaking of Twitter, we asked Ray and Dregs on Twitter, what are the biggest questions you have about your NHL team moving forward with a 56-game shortened season starting on Wednesday, starting this week? So I'm going to fire a couple of questions your way. Ask Ray and Dregs anything. First one from Leighton. And Leighton says, with there being no Ontario Hockey League for the time being, does Jamie Drysdale get a real good look to start the year in Anaheim? And is that a good idea, Ray, or maybe not such a good idea?
Good idea. Get him in Anaheim. If he's not playing, he's going to be on the taxi squad. He's got nowhere else to go. The one thing you got to remember here to everybody is, I believe it's 6 games now before they start tolling on the contract. Right. So you can't just kind of have a rookie like just hanging around, because now you get into his free agency years further down the road. But yes, I'd keep him.
All right. From Jason, have the Montreal Canadiens filled enough holes on offense to bring them into contention for the top 4 spots in the Canadian division? I think I know your answer to this. Yeah. Toffoli should help. Unsure about Anderson, but is that enough to bump the Habs up the ladder a few spots?
Yep. You know how I feel about them. Yeah. I hope I'm not tricked by all their additions, but I think Josh Anderson will have a good year. He's healthy, and his year stunk last year, but that's not the norm. The norm is what happened in front of that year. Right. So that's a good ad. Tyler Toffoli's a good ad. A maturing Kotkaniemi is a good ad. Nick Suzuki is in his second year. You always wonder about that second year dip, but I think Montreal is definitely a top 4 team.
All right, from Jeff, what can Oilers fans, Ray, reasonably expect from their young defense? Now he's talking about Jones, he's talking about Bear, Bouchard. He fully discloses his bias as an Oiler fan, but he says, look, this crop of young developing defensemen has me pretty excited. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I should be excited, but I don't know if it's for right now.
Okay.
I would think there's going to be some pretty bumpy spots for those young guys because they're not just being asked to play. They're being asked to play a lot and important minutes for them. They're going to miss Oscar Klefbom a lot, but I have Edmonton right in that mix to fight it in the 4 spot in the division.
Okay. Penguins fan, Henry, he wants to know if we believe that the Penguins still have the motivation to compete with the hungrier and younger teams. Now, I'm going to qualify, you answer that, but I'm going to qualify by saying, look, of course, Jimmy Rutherford is keenly aware of his roster and the fact that he knows he's got to add some younger pieces, right? And he's going to try and do that this year. And one thing we know about Jimmy, he always finds a way to make that trade or multiple trades to shake things up. So do you think the Penguins still have that motivation to compete with the hungrier and younger teams?
Yeah, because I believe they're at the point now where, their big chunk of their core, Malkin, Crosby, Letang, they're getting to the point where you're like, we don't have 5 more cracks at this.
Yeah.
We might only have 1 more crack as a group at this. And so I think the motivation comes from a little realization of where they're at age-wise, but also the desperation to do it again. All
right, last question. Ask Ray and Driggs Anything goes to Klaus. Klaus is wondering, are the Bruins in a rebuild mode, or what would we call their status right now? With young players like Pasternak, I mean, Marchand's not that young anymore, but it feels like that nucleus is still strong enough that it's not a rebuild, all right?
It's not quite a rebuild yet, Driggs. It's not quite, because you still have pretty significant pieces there. However, I'm closer to a rebuild than to staying at their current status because of this. Bergeron and Krejci are their top 2 centers, and they're not getting younger, even though they're both still fantastic players. I still think they're both terrific players, but their defense really took a hit here. 2 of their 3 left side defensemen are gone. They're going to miss Torrey Krug. Matt Grzelcyk is a real key for them, replacing Krug. What Charlie McAvoy can do, how much more, because there is more that McAvoy can take on. Like he's got to be, McAvoy has to be that number 1 lead dog now, for them, and that's a big step. So I think they're transitioning into this rebuild and retool or refurbishment or whatever the hell you want to call it, but they can't quite be the team that they were before. Not quite yet, until some of these young guys take hold again.
You know, I'm looking forward to the next week and then episode 6, because then we can, really start chewing on some games, right? And kind of getting comfortable with what our lives are. I mean, we still don't really know. I mean, we know we're doing games. How many, where, how, all of that stuff. I mean,
man, doesn't it feel like the floor is shifting under us all the time? And it's like, we think you're doing this, but maybe not. You might be doing this. And,
I know.
Everybody's trying to get the schedules all together. I have my first little bit. I'm locked into that. I'll be doing the Toronto-Ottawa game on Friday. Is my first game on the 15th.
Nice. Me too. No, that's not true. I just learned I'm doing a Jets game on Thursday. So.
Well, there you go.
There we go.
Opening night for you.
Excited about. All right. Well, that'll give us lots to talk about in episode 6. And mystery guest. We have a mystery guest. I don't want to mention it yet because I was going to promote, but in fairness to the individual who's a big name, Ray, Big name, big name
Well,
player.
it's news to me. I haven't heard.
No, you know, but
Oh,
I
do-
can't promote the
okay.
player yet because all of a sudden then there was a conflict. Now we get into the season, and these players have jobs. They're playing for their teams as much as a priority as the podcast.
They have to schedule that around that.
Yeah. So,
Funny,
and apparently, see, selfishly, I think that they should schedule around your schedule and my schedule, but unfortunately, that's not how they look at it.
Not gonna happen.
No, it's not going to happen. All right, buddy. Well, wherever your travels take you, I guess Ottawa on Friday, right?
Yep. But not much travel this year, it looks
No.
like. But I'll be in Ottawa Friday.
Good stuff. Looking forward to it. We're going to wrap with a huge shout out to our partners who make the pod possible on a week-by-week basis. You know who they are. Coolbet.co, the free-to-play sports and casino games website. And if you're interested in partnering with us here, just reach out to us on our website, rayanddregs.com. That's episode 5. Look forward to episode 6. And in the meantime, stay safe, everybody.